He thought it was just another janitor, someone to laugh at, someone to look down on in front of the crowd. But what that passenger didn't know was that the man he mocked carried a story etched in sacrifice, honor, and silent pride. In seconds, a single object would shatter every assumption, turning shame into respect. What happens when arrogance collides with truth? And a simple medal forces an entire airport to stop and stare? It was a busy afternoon at the airport. Travelers rushed past the security gates, dragging suitcases and checking their phones, each caught up in their own world. In the middle of it all, a janitor moved quietly from one corner to another, sweeping discarded coffee cups and candy wrappers without drawing much attention. His uniform was faded, his shoes worn, yet his movements carried a kind of patience only life could teach. Most people barely noticed him. Just another worker doing a thankless job. But behind those calm eyes was a man with decades of experience, battles fought far away from the comfort of this airport floor. To him, every step was steady, deliberate, as if carrying a weight no one else could see. He had lived through storms, through sacrifice, through moments that had tested his very soul. Yet, to the passengers hurrying by, he was invisible. That was about to change. Near the boarding gate, a man in a crisp suit slowed down, his eyes narrowing as he caught sight of the janitor. A smirk formed on his lips, the kind of smirk born out of arrogance. He whispered something under his breath, then laughed, loud enough for a few nearby passengers to turn their heads. What he didn't realize was that his attempt to belittle someone would soon backfire in a way that no one at this airport would ever forget. The man in the suit leaned back against a column, sipping his overpriced coffee, his eyes fixed on the janitor as if he were a spectacle put there for his amusement. Pathetic, he muttered louder this time, ensuring the word carried across the terminal. A few passengers shifted uncomfortably, but no one spoke up. Airports were like that. Strangers witnessed cruelty, but silence often won. The janitor didn't respond. He bent down, carefully picking up a discarded snack wrapper, then dusted the edge of a bench with quiet precision. His restraint, his silence, only seemed to provoke the suited man further. "Look at this guy," the passenger scoffed, gesturing to a woman nearby. "Probably never worked a real job in his life, just pushing a broom. And this is who they hire at an international airport?" He chuckled, shaking his head, his voice dripping with contempt. A few people glanced toward the janitor, curiosity mingling with discomfort. The janitor remained calm, his face a mask of dignity, though inside a storm churned. He had endured far worse insults in his life. On the battlefield, under fire, when every second meant survival. This moment, compared to those, was nothing. And yet, the sting of being mocked in front of strangers cut deep. Still, he did not react. The suited man, sensing no resistance, grew bolder. He followed the janitor with his gaze, tossing snide remarks each time the broom swept across the floor. A group of teenagers nearby began to snicker, emboldened by his behavior. It was a performance now, a cruel show staged in the middle of Gate 27. But unnoticed by many, a small detail began to catch the eyes of a few observant passengers. Each time the janitor bent down, the sleeve of his faded uniform shifted just enough to reveal a glint of metal pinned to the inside of his jacket. At first it seemed like nothing, just a piece of jewelry. But one man, sitting quietly with his newspaper, froze when he saw it. His eyes widened, his breath caught in his chest. He knew exactly what that medal meant. He leaned forward, trying to get a better look, his hands trembling slightly. This wasn't just any medal. It was a decoration reserved for acts of valor, the kind of honor that could only be earned through unimaginable courage, the kind of medal that told a story without a single word spoken. The suited man was still laughing, still trying to entertain the crowd. But whispers were beginning to spread. A couple at the gate exchanged looks. Another passenger tilted her head, realization dawning on her face. Something wasn't right about this scene, not at all. The janitor finally straightened up, his movements slow, deliberate. As he reached for his cart, the jacket shifted once more, and this time the metal caught the light fully. For a brief moment, it shone like a silent truth in the middle of all the noise. Gasps rippled through the small crowd. Heads turned, and the man in the suit, still smirking, hadn't noticed that the tide of attention was no longer on the janitor's broom, but on the metal that gleamed against his chest. The laughter stopped the moment the suited man finally noticed the shift in the crowd. He frowned, confused, as eyes no longer mirrored his smug amusement, but widened with respect, shock, even shame. Slowly, he followed their gaze, and that's when he saw it. Pinned against the janitor's chest, half hidden beneath the faded jacket, gleamed a medal few would ever lay eyes on in person. The Medal of Honor. A hush fell across the terminal. People who had been scrolling through their phones moments earlier now stood frozen, their breaths caught. The janitor's hands paused on the broom handle, as if the weight of memory had pressed down on him again. His silence was no longer that of invisibility. It was the silence of someone who had already fought wars so others wouldn't have to. The suited man's smirk faltered. His voice, once loud and mocking, now caught in his throat. "Wait, that's not—" His words stumbled, failing him in front of dozens of witnesses. His arrogance, built brick by brick on the backs of others, cracked with every passing second. One passenger, a middle-aged veteran, rose from his seat. His eyes glistened as he stepped forward, raising a trembling hand in salute. The gesture was simple, but its impact was electric. Another traveler followed, then another. Within moments, the very space where the janitor had been mocked turned into a quiet hall of honor. The janitor didn't boast. He didn't even speak. His eyes, weary yet steady, glanced at the people around him, then lowered again. For him, the medal was never about recognition. It was about sacrifice, about brothers who hadn't made it back. But for everyone watching, it was a revelation. The man they had ignored, the man some had laughed at, stood before them as a living symbol of courage. And the passenger who mocked him now stood small, exposed, drowning in his own shame. The janitor lowered his broom slowly, his eyes fixed on the floor, as if the weight of memories pressed heavier than the stairs around him. He hadn't asked for this moment. He never wanted an audience. To him, the medal was a reminder of sacrifice, of the brothers who hadn't made it back, of nights spent in silence with only ghosts for company. But for the crowd, it was something else entirely. In that quiet terminal, the air felt different. Travelers who had once hurried past without a glance now stood still, their eyes burning with respect. The man in the suit tried to shrink into his corner, his arrogance dissolved into regret. For the first time, he realized the cruelty of his words, and the smallness of his own accomplishments compared to the life of the man he mocked. A child tugged at her father's hand, whispering, "Daddy, is he a hero?" The father nodded slowly, unable to look away. The janitor didn't respond, didn't need to. His silence was answer enough. And then, without a single word, he pushed his cart forward, continuing his work. Not for applause, not for validation, but because that was who he was. A man who carried on, no matter what. His strength wasn't in the medal, or the salute, or the whispers of awe. It was in the quiet dignity of doing what needed to be done. As he disappeared down the hall, the image lingered. For some, it was a lesson in humility. For others, a reminder that true worth isn't always wrapped in wealth, status, or appearances. Sometimes, it's found in the quiet heroes walking among us, unseen until the truth shines through. The question remains, how many more will we overlook before we finally learn to see the value in every person, no matter their uniform, their job, or their skin?